it's really about Frank Eaton and the family. And of course, this year we're celebrating 100 years of when the students saw Frank Eaton in the Armistice Day Parade and said, that's the guy that ought to be, this is who our mascot ought to be, not the Tigers. And they were spot on because the faculty and staff agreed with them. And so being that representative and being put in situations, as we all have been, and as Bryce will be, where you're asked to make a few remarks about what it's like to be Pete, that's a heavy responsibility.
Rick, why did you want to be Pistol Pete?
It looked like a heck of a lot of fun. I had, back in the mid-'70s, I'd gone to a wrestling tournament and I got to interact with Pete, and I wanted to put the head on. He wouldn't let me put the head on, but he told me that I could stand there and he'd lower the head over my shoulders. And so that interaction at that wrestling duel in Gallagher is really kind of what started it. And so didn't really think much of it. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school and came up here and I wasn't talented enough to be any sport. So I thought, well, how can I get on the field? And started watching Shane LeDuc at that time, and then Rob Reynolds and Jesse Lancaster, and I said, I can do that. So,
how tall were you in relation to that Pete head when you were 6 or 7 years old?
We were probably about the same height. I might have been just a little bit taller, but it was, you know, he just, and the gentleman at the time was Tom Bennett, who I think you said was Pistol Pete number 23. And the only reason I know that is because I got his autograph at that wrestling duel, and I kept it. It's in a scrapbook. And what, ironically, Tom wrote his name after he wrote Pistol Pete. He wrote Tom Bennett. So that's the only way that I would have ever known which Pete it was. So that friendship has really been special in forming over these years since I was selected.
Bryce, you're the current Pete. Why did you want to be the man at OSU?
Well, growing up, you know, I got to see Pistol Pete a lot. Most of my family went to school here, so Pistol Pete's something I was, you know, got to see, watch game days, come up here. It's Pete, you know. You think of OSU, you think of Pistol Pete. And it's always stuck out into my mind, Pistol Pete. And if you know my personality, it makes a lot of sense of why I would want to be Pistol Pete. Like Rick, I played 3 sports in high school. I never thought about being a quote-unquote mascot. But I got up here, the fraternity I am in, there's been three of the 4 past Pistol Petes were in that house, and I got to go through the house and watch them do it, learn more about it, and they just kept encouraging me to be like, you'd be a great Pete, and kind of just went out of my comfort zone, tried out. 2 years ago, I guess it would be, didn't get it, came back the next year, and I'm now, they chose me to be Pete, and it's been a blessing, so, but yeah.
What did you do differently from the first time you auditioned to the second?
Oh, well, I put in more work and more research on the history of Frank Eaton, read his book a couple more times, and, you know, asked questions from the Petes I did know, you know, picked their brains about it. And with that's really a pretty important thing. You've got to know Frank Eaton. You've got to know the legacy you are representing, because that's truly the most important part of Pistol Pete is, you know, making him proud.
Scott, those who go to Oklahoma State know who Frank Eaton is. He is an integral part of this university. But for those who are not familiar with the man who inspired Pistol Pete, who is Frank Eaton?
Wow. So Frank was born in 1860 in Connecticut, of all places, and his family ended up here in Kansas and then down in Oklahoma. But yeah, he had a very colorful life as a federal marshal, a blacksmith. He kind of wore a lot of different hats throughout his life, but had a big family and a lot of kids. And so really that's our connection, you know, to Frank today are his kids. And just as recently as today, I spoke to one of the great grandchildren of Frank Eaton, is somebody I'd never spoken to before, but he had reached out on Facebook and said, hey, I have a fiddle. I haven't even told these guys, I told Rick, but.
Rick can't keep a secret.
No, so you heard about it earlier, yeah. So he has a fiddle of Frank Eaton's. Frank was a fiddle player, apparently a really great fiddle player, and he was going into detail about this fiddle that's got rattlesnake rattlers in it, and so he would beat it like a tambourine when he played it, like I play the fiddle, and anyway. I know you don't beat a fiddle down here, but
I guess you can.
you could. I could, but anyway. So those stories.
It's your story.
I'm making it up as I go now, just like
They don't know.
Yeah, I know. Frank probably made some stories up too, but he did write that book. He had I guess, dictated a book that was written in the early 50s, and it's been reprinted, and actually Rick has been very involved with a publishing company that has helped reprint it yet again and put all the Pistol Pete names in the back so that people can collect those signatures of those guys like Tom Bennett, So she didn't ask me why I was Pete, but I'll get there eventually.
Why were you Pete? Why were you Pete?
Well, so I was in theater, and unlike these guys, I was not a three-sport athlete. And so I was in theater and speech and debate in high school, and when I was in my fraternity, I got to know the guy that was Pete at the current time, and I just asked him one time, I was like, hey, what is this about? And just happened to be this guy. And so he goes, hey, you ought to come over and put the head on. And so I kind of got that entree earlier than the night before tryouts or the weekend before tryouts like they do now. And so Rick let me try on the head. And
You did a great job.
yeah, you trained me very well. So.
Billy and Stephen, do you want to share your stories as to why you wanted to be Pete? I don't want you guys to feel left out.
Yeah, don't feel left out, guys.
I'm going to agree with these two guys. I mean, I grew up in a small town, three-sport athlete. You come here and you're like, it just all goes away. I'm not good enough at baseball or football or to play those sports here at Oklahoma State. So you're like, hey, what can I do to be involved, right? I want to be involved in the university, no matter what it is. And I had a fraternity brother that was Pete, and you kind of see that theme here, right? And so I had a fraternity brother as Pete, and then met one of the cheerleaders, and they all lied to you and say you'd be a great Pete. So you get that, and you're like, hey, I can do this, right? So then you go interview, and you don't get it, and then you think about all the things that you could have said, and then, oh, well, you come back. And then it's Steven's turn.
And then you don't get it again like me.
Well, I know. Well, and then there's that third time.
Yeah.
You don't
and then
get
you
it.
just feel bad for me,
exactly.
so you pick me.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Not quite.
No.
There's some coaching we did on the fourth time. So you did good. You did good.
You auditioned 4 times.
Third time I got it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. It just seems like.
Just 3. Reason I wanted to be Pistol Pete was because I met a Pete that served a couple of years before me, Landon Stallings, and I got to see Pete outside of the Gallagher Boone Pickens atmosphere and more kind of personal appearances like hospital visits. And I thought the coolest thing about serving as Pistol Pete was the guys split about 600 events a year. So we're doing a lot of weddings and birthday parties and some of the best days in people's lives. Pete gets to be a part of those days and bring joy in those moments. But the cool thing that I saw was going to those places like hospital visits, and some Petes have even done funerals. Pete being a part of those days and some of the hardest days in people's lives, there was just as much joy in those moments, Pete being there. So representing something that meant so much to so many people, and being able to display that was really cool to see.
Yeah. I had a friend pass away from COVID, and we had Pete show up at his funeral, and it actually lightens the attitude or the atmosphere, so it's actually a icebreaker in some ways.
Yeah, I was going to ask how those who portray Pete are representatives of the university, and normally you think of a mascot walking into a stadium or a wedding and gets the party started, but what's their behavior at a funeral?
He walked in at the end, and I think right before that, the funeral director said, I've had 2 new things happen at this funeral. He goes, I've never gotten 250 pictures, right, for the clause, right? And then he goes, I've never had Pistol Pete show up. And then he came in to the OSU fight song. So yeah, then people took pictures with him, and that was the end of the service. And he stayed up front whenever everybody went by. And so, yeah, it was a great deal.
You guys were joking about the audition process, Stephen, going through it 3 times. So what is it like being on the panel to pick who the next Pistol Pete is?
I think like Rob said it best when he said it's stressful at times. Not a bad kind of stress necessarily, but there's a lot of responsibility. And so I'll let Rick say his little speech.
Well, it's so much different because, when you're trying out as Pete, you really don't know what you're getting into. You have no clue. You just think, oh, it looks like a lot of fun. You're traveling around with, cheerleaders and pom-pom girls and seeing fans, and you just have no clue. Once you become Pete, you realize real quick, ooh, this is a lot of work. But in that interview process, you understand as a candidate that the importance, you get your eyes get opened up wide real quick, because you realize that there's these older guys sitting here, and they're the only thing between you and what you want. And what they hold dear is the Eaton family and the name. And so when you're a judge on the other side, we push aside the element of all the excitement and the pomp and circumstance, and now it becomes much more endeared to us on the tradition and the character of the Eaton family and being responsible to that. And so as a judge, that's really where we place our line. And all the rest of it, we could take any guy and put him under a head and give me a couple hours, and we can turn him into a Pistol Pete. That's the easy part. The caricature and the integrity is what we're looking for, and the responsibility.
Scott, a lot of people might wonder, why is that important? Pistol Pete can't talk, you don't see his face, you have no idea who he is. So why is upholding the integrity of Frank Eaton and the Eaton family and having this well-spoken mascot important to the selection committee?
Well, primarily because it's the icon of the university. I mean, for starters, you articulated it very well, though. It's really about Frank Eaton and the family. And of course, this year we're celebrating 100 years of when the students saw Frank Eaton in the Armistice Day Parade and said, that's the guy that ought to be, this is who our mascot ought to be, not the Tigers. And they were spot on, because the faculty and staff agreed with them. And so being that representative and being put in situations, as we all have been, and as Bryce will be, where you're asked to make a few remarks about what it's like to be Pete, that's a heavy responsibility. And so, like Rick said, and we want to vet and make sure that we've got the best, most qualified candidate that's going to represent the university with the best orange heart possible.
And for those listening or watching who don't know, Oklahoma State's mascot was the Tiger at one point in time due to someone's love of the Princeton Tigers. Princeton of the Prairies back in the day when
Right.
OAMC was first founded, for those who are listening and don't know that. But back to Pistol Pete, our current mascot of the last 100 years. I want to ask one more question about the audition process. And Bryce, since you are the most recent person to have gone through that, for those who might be interested in trying out, what can they expect in the audition process?
Well, it's really nothing that you would expect of maybe an audition or an interview. It's the mood in there, like they say, it's very serious to them. So like when you go in there and you've never done it before, you're like, these guys mean business, like it's very serious. But then in a certain point of it, like Billy, he'll make you laugh. I mean, he's always kind of joking around, and they're kind of lightening the mood to make you more comfortable, because they're really wanting to get to know you, who you are as a true person, as quick as possible in that period of time they're allotted with you. And like stated, that is very important. Somebody who can represent the university outside of the head, be able to talk, be able to portray, maybe the story of Frank Eaton if asked, what it's based off of, and a lot of things.
Stephen, what was your reaction when you found out that after 3 years of auditioning, you were going to be Pistol Pete?
I think it was, I was ecstatic, first of all. Coming from a small town, again, not being a three-sport athlete, definitely not. You try out for things in your hometown and you fill those spots because there's not enough people in your hometown to fill the spots, right? So they have to pick somebody. But Pistol Pete and not being selected the first year and coming back the second year and not being selected the second year, it's a constant thing. There wasn't one day that I went in between the tryouts that I didn't think about wanting to serve as Pistol Pete, for OSU. just because of my love for the university. I grew up an OU fan, then I grew up and grew out of that stage. And OSU like became my home, you know? So the night to be selected as Pistol Pete was just full circle, you know, and it became an eye-opening experience. I was better able to serve as Pistol Pete because I took that time to really like, my love for the university grew even more. So definitely emotional night for sure, and I was really excited.
Go ahead. I was going to say, Bryce did a great job of articulating Billy, you know, lightening the mood and all of that. But as Rick said, I mean, we take it very seriously, and the tone is very, very clear as we're talking through it. But it's also a burden when you're debating and you've got a favorite, and man, you really think he's probably going to be the best one. And then somebody else is pointing out the other 3 or 4 or 5 qualities that maybe this guy doesn't quite have, but the youthfulness of it, you can tell he really wants it. He'll be back. And we ask him, you know, would you try out again if you didn't get it? So that tells us a little bit about their commitment and passion. Some of those guys didn't show back up, but some of them did. And so those are the guys you know have a heartfelt spot for this opportunity and are really dedicated to trying to make it fit.
Do people get like brownie points for showing up again? You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, we
Not
really liked you
necessarily.
last year.
No.
You're here.
If you got it, you got it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you always recognize the guys that come back.
Sure.
And that's what you're after, because really it's like anything else in life. And many of us, we've got several miles down the road since we've graduated from college. And so we look at things a little bit differently. But if I see a guy that comes back 2, 3, 4 times, I mean, we've had a number of those that have come back, have tried out 4 times. They tried out and even into their master year, and they want to be Pete, and they've got the passion, but for whatever reason, they weren't selected. It's hard. It's hard as a judge, because you remember, I was that guy. I would have done anything. I mean, I would have done anything. And when I tried out, I was so clueless and naive. I mean, I was just there to have a good time. And like I said, then you realize, there's really something more to that. But I think by many of us having a number of miles down the road after this, that we see ourselves in certain guys, but we're really looking for the guy that's got the passion, that is a Stephen Bocconi, that says, I'm coming back. I mean, my son tried out 3 times. And I mean, it was, and I was completely void of the Pistol Pete organization during that period of time while he was in school. But, you wait by the phone.
Have you ever had to turn away someone who's auditioned 4 times and this is their last chance?
Yes.
What's that like?
Not fun. It's not fun.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a reality in life, though, that it's not a fit for everybody. And so, yeah, it's tough.
In some cases, it's not that person wasn't good, it's just they weren't good enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
Bryce, we will start with you. I want to hear from everybody, so we'll just go down the line with this one. What is your favorite memory of being Pistol Pete?
That's a good one. I mean, I've got a little bit more days and weeks and months of Pete to come ahead of me, so there's probably going to be some that replace a couple of these, but probably like a meaningful memory would be, I did the ring ceremony for the class rings last semester, and I'm handing the rings out, handed all of them out. I'd step off the stage and I'm going to go change, and Pete was going home. And well, this little boy walks up to me and just like starts hugging me on the leg. And he's like, look what I drew. And and I still have it. I'm going to keep it. It's a drawing of like a book he drew on a piece of paper. And it's got a picture of Pistol Pete. And it says the history of Pistol Pete. And he handed it to me. And he's like, I made this for you. And then probably a funny one was there was a little kid and I was at a wedding. And our wild rag thing right here, he lifted it up and just looked in our chin hole, the pea head. He's like, I knew it. He said, you might want to keep the head on. But it was funny. It was funny. The kid had some swagger to him a little bit, some grit to be funny. But yeah, those are probably right now my top 2 things that have happened to me.
Those are solid. Solid. Stephen.
Something fun that I got to be a part of was we had about 15 college mascots fly out to the Bachelor Mansion and shoot a video with Chris Harrison and a couple people from The Bachelor based off of the college football playoffs and a final rose ceremony representing the 4 teams that went to the playoffs that year. Yeah, that was awesome. Got to meet I'm in a group me with like 1,300 college mascots from around the U.S. in this group me that I had to mute the first day I was in it.
That's cool.
Something more emotional. I got a text message my first summer as Pete asking if I could come to Skytook for an older man that was going to be put in hospice the following day. So they sent me 3 dates for their schedule that would work well for them. And the only date that worked was the very next day. So I got in my car at the time and drove to Skytook. And I went into that house. The whole family was there, and the man that was going to be put on hospice was watching TV, and you had several kids running out, it's Pistol Pete, it's Pistol Pete. And the man turned around and his mood just suddenly went 180, and a very sad day to him turned into something that was enjoyable, which was really cool. And we went outside and took a lot of photos with the family. And after that, all the kids went back inside, and I took the head off and got to talk to him about how he met his wife at OSU, and some of his best memories were in Stillwater. I found out that the very next day that man had passed away. So that was something that was, I was so happy that my calendar was booked on those other 2 days, and I went that next day to go to Skytook and be a part of, some of his last moments and how I got to represent something that he loved so much. So it's just those kind of things that are a little more emotional, that you're happy that you have a head on in the moment because of how emotional they are. But I'll never remember the score of a single football game that I cheered as Pete at, but I'll always remember those moments.
So I got to be there when Eddie Sutton showed up. So it was kind of nice to be, hanging out in the basketball court with Eddie and the team. There's a lot of, things that go along with that. We were in, I think it was Virginia for the Sweet 16. And the girls had Cornell Hatcher, and I can't remember one of the other basketball players in that room, and all hanging out talking. And this knocks is on the door, right? Well, the girls gets up, goes and opens the door, and there in the doorway is Eddie Sutton, okay? Says nothing. Cornell Hatcher and the other guy get up and they just walk out. That was the last time that the basketball team and the cheer squad stayed in the same hotel, okay? That was kind of interesting. But yeah, so hanging out with Eddie and being a 6,000 seat arena and it being rocking pretty good. All the little kid stories. You have the kid that throws the ball in your hat that's OU fan and just follows you around the whole time at your second event ever. That's really stressful. And then you go to Special Olympics and I decide to take a break, and there's this girl and her mom is talking to somebody and she looks at me and she asks me a question. And I'm like, my hand over mouth, can't talk kind of thing. She goes, "What? You cannot talk?" And I said, she goes, no, she goes, "Spit it out." And I shake my head no. And she goes, "What? You cannot talk?" I go, "No." And after a while, her mom gets through and stuff. And she goes, and she's walking off and her mom's dragging her along. She's stumbling behind. She goes, "Can you hear?" And I shake my head yes. She goes, "Well, at least you can do something." And I'm like, that was funny. Yeah, so a lot of stories in there. Some you can't share, some you can. How that works out. But always a great time being Pete.
Oh, man. Man, so many great memories. And I was thinking of one as we were going down the aisle, as we were going down the row here, and it involved a bear that you borrowed from me.
That was a dog.
It was a dog. You're right, it was a dog.
I was actually going to tell that story, but I'm glad that I'm not, because it allows me to tell another one.
That's right, great. I'm not.
And I was only going to tell it.
No, I'm not going to tell that story now.
No, you have to tell it, because I wasn't going to tell it.
It stops right here.
No, I wasn't going to tell it because, I was going to tell that story because you're here,
all right,
and I've never told the story, but your perspective was much better than mine.
It was awesome.
Because I was kind of clueless.
So, okay, I'll tell the story. So, my roommate at the time had this dog, and it had these big floppy ears. Looked a little bit like Top Dog. For those of you that maybe don't know, another school in the state had a dog that represented as their mascot.
We don't know why.
But now they have ponies.
Let me give just a real brief backstory.
Yeah, here we go.
Our coach at the time was Paul Hansen. Paul Hansen was asked to leave, basically. That's the nice way of putting it. It was his last game as coach for Oklahoma State University. He'd been there for years. In Old Gallagher against OU. The students loved him.
Absolutely.
Administration said, "We love you, but you're losing you're losing too many games. So you're gonna have to leave." So that's a little backstory. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
So he comes in. Rick comes in. He's getting ready to compete at this game here in Gallagher High, and
I'm always looking for something to do.
And here's this little dog, and he goes, "Hey, can I borrow that dog tonight? I'm going to use it as a prop at the basketball game." And I said, "Well, I mean, I guess it's my roommate's dog. He won't know. Just sure.
Bring it back."
So he goes and takes this dog, and I'm sitting in the stands watching Rick Pete, and he's out there, Pete, and he's taking the dog and he's hitting it, he's got it in his lasso and he's dragging it around. He's kicking it, and he takes it off the lasso and he throws it into the stands, and I go, ooh. And all of a sudden, fluff stuff starts coming out onto the floor of the basketball court, and here comes one ear, and here comes another ear, and then the rest of the dog. It's all torn up, and Rick picks it up, walks over, picks it up, and he kind of looks at me in the stands, and I'm like, dude, you just destroyed my roommate's dog. And so
He really liked his pet.
I guess he liked his little
Boy
pet
or
puppy.
whatever.
Anyway, stuffed animal his girlfriend had given him. So Rick's like, I got this after the game. He's like, I got it. He goes, my girlfriend will sew it up. So she tries to sew it up, and the ears are like this, and it doesn't look the same. Anyway, we put it back on his bed, just no big deal. I don't know, it's maybe a month later, he's sitting there, he's looking at his dog, and he goes, God, these ears were really put on sloppy. I never noticed it. And I said, Rick's got a story to tell you. So anyway, that's Rick's story. I chuckled as this was coming down the road because I thought of Rick's story. I got to banter with the San Diego Chicken at KU at a football game, and we're on the field, and I don't know why the San Diego Chicken was there. I guess he may have been the former Jayhawk. We never really figured out why he was there. But anyway, so normally the mascots will set up a skit or something before the game, and we didn't ever talk. But he comes up to me on the field before the game starts, and he's kind of a jerk. He's kind of talking like, hey, give me your gun. And I said, I'm not giving, mascots will talk to each other. We'll talk to law enforcement. We'll talk to officials if we need to, but we don't talk to the public. But mascots talk. So he's like, give me your gun. And I'm not giving you my gun. And he goes, just give me your blankety-blank gun. He starts cussing at me. And I'm like, I'm not giving you my gun. Well, the cheerleaders kind of see this banter, and I'm squaring off,
With the head on.
With the head on, totally. Yeah, we're in character. And so I'm squaring off, and he's acting like he's up. So the cheerleaders start going, shoot the bird, shoot the bird. They're doing this chant, and the fans, we're closer to the OSU side, and they're chanting along, all 30 of us, when they were all chanting along. And so anyway, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get some of this bird. And so I shoot right at his feet, boom, boom, boom. And of course, he acts like he's hit, and he walks off. But that was kind of a great interaction. But yeah, at one point, we ended up, like, when he wanted the gun, he grabs me and hugs me. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, so on the social media about 5 years ago, this picture comes out with Pistol Pete and the San Diego Chicken. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this picture before. This is incredible. So for about 4 or 5 years, I was like, that's me. There's not another Pete that's interacted with the San Diego Chicken. Well, no, I guess I was wrong, because in 1980, apparently, the San Diego Chicken and another Pistol Pete interacted, so we have this running debate.
Really?
Is it Carter?
It's Carter.
Really?
Yeah. He says it was him. I don't think it was.
Oh,
he's not here to
He's
defend
just
himself.
trying to steal the limelight.
Yeah.
That's Carter.
Anyway, a lot of great memories, for sure.
I have three. One is the most unusual thing I'd ever done. I know. I'll go quick. I'll tell you.
Get comfy, Billy.
You already
get
used the
comfy.
dog one. What else you got?
No, I didn't use that.
That's
That was
one.
yours.
That,
So it's 1980 fall, winter of 1985, and Dave Martin calls and says, "Hey, you got an invitation from the University of Colorado to come out and go skiing at the Chips Invitational."
and Dave was assistant athletic director.
Yeah, Dave Martin was the assistant athletic director. So anyway, I said, "What?" And so he said, "Yeah, they're inviting a select group of mascots from around the country to come out to Colorado, and they had the Chips. It was the first annual Chips Invitational." And so I go, yeah. So Dave Martin and his daughter and myself all fly out to Colorado. We go to Mammoth Mountain or something, whatever it was. We went skiing, and they decide they want us to ski down the mountain with our outfits on.
Had you been skiing before?
Oh yeah, I could ski. That wasn't the problem. The problem was it's a 45-pound head that kind of throws your balance off.
Yes, but
So, yeah.
not having skied would also be an added challenge.
Exactly.
Right. It's a good point.
So we've got Top Dog's there, unfortunately. He's there, USC, the Trojan's there. He's running around his little skivvies, freezing his hiney off. He's got his little Roman outfit on. The Oregon Duck was there. Alabama, the elephant was there. And then there's me. And so I try, and to go back, there's two heads. At the time, we only had one head. And in 85, in the fall of 85, we had gotten a call from the athletic department from a gentleman named Mr. Johnson out in California. And he called Martin's office. I'm kind of going back for you, but I'll speed up. He calls Dave Martin's
Same story?
office, and he leaves a message, and he says, I need to talk to somebody. I've got this cowboy head, and I need to know something to do with it. So Dave Martin, if you know Dave Martin, Dave calls me and he says, "Hey Rick, some guy calls and says he has a cowboy head. Can you call him and find out?" And I said, "Well, where is he?" He said, "He's in California." I said, "Oh, okay." So I call this guy, and I get him on the phone, and he's in his 80s, and he keeps telling me, "I've got this cowboy head. Do you want it?" And I go, "Well, wait a second. What you got? What? Do I want it?" And I go, "I don't even know what you have." He goes, "I got a cowboy head. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Okay, give me a little bit of backstory on what this is." He goes, "Look, I used to work for Walt Disney. He was one of the the famous 7 that were the animators that Walt hired specifically. And he said, I've got this cowboy head, and we made it for your university back in 1962. And I said, wait a second, you've got the Pete head? And he goes, I don't know anybody named Pete, but I got a cowboy head, and I want to know, do you want it? And I said, well, so I get a little more frank. I said, yeah, I want it. And I said, so what have you been doing with it? He said, well, we didn't do anything with it. He goes, I retired and I had it in my warehouse of stuff. And when I retired, they told me to take all of my stuff that I wanted, take it with me. And he said, I took it. He said, I sent it to Ireland because they needed a leprechaun for a parade. And he said, so we painted the hat green, put shamrocks around the brim, and we made him a leprechaun. And I said, okay, sure. So about a week later, this giant wooden box shows up over in Gallagher. And Dave calls and he says, hey, you got a big box here with your name on it. So I show up and I'm thinking, okay, that's the Pete head. So I get over there and I open it up and there's a little envelope and it's got these little Polaroid pictures that he's standing out there in his boxer shorts and his little white t-shirt next to the mailbox with his Pete head on. And
he's got red hair.
Yeah, and then he's got another picture of it on a mold. And so this was the mold. So Dave and I are lifting this head up out of this wooden crate. Well, when we lift it up, the hat comes off. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so we pull this green hat out, and we set it aside, and there's a Pete head in there. Well, the Pete head was bald, and the hat you could take on and off. So fast forward to the Pete's Invitational. I took that head with me to Colorado. And so I tried to ski down the mountain with the big 45-pound head, and I was falling and looked like a fool. So I get down to the bottom of the mountain, and I told Dave, I said, I'm taking this hat off. And so I took that hat off, and now I look like
a leprechaun.
I look like a skinny dude with a big fat head, and it's bald, and it's got these big sideburns and a beard. And so and chaps. And so I take the ski lift back to the top of the mountain, and so I'm getting it. I'm hoofing it through the race course, and so anyway, that was a memorable occasion, and I still have those photographs.
Was that 3 memories? Was that
No,
3?
that was the one. That was the one. I'm the only Pistol Pete. This is my other memory. I'm at Kansas State, and we had just scored. And whenever we score, we kick the field goal. We always shoot off the shotgun. So I'm standing there waiting for us to kick the field goal. We shoot the field goal. I unload both barrels. Well, right as I unload both barrels, a referee walks by that I didn't see. He wasn't standing there when I got in position, and I shot both barrels off right over his head, and he hit the ground. And so he immediately jumps up, grabs me, trying to get the head off. He's cussing me out and telling me to take that head off, and I'm holding the head down, and he's trying to pull it off. And so it looks like the ref and Pete are having a wrestling match in the end zone. Kurt Carter's watching this whole deal, thank God. And so the very next week, I get called into Myron Roderick's office. I'm the only
Athletic
director. I'm the only mascot, Pistol Pete, at Oklahoma State University that's ever been formally written up by at the time it was the Big Eight. And they were wanting to reprimand me and have Myron boot me. And Myron said, well, we're not booting him. So, and Kurt Carter came to my defense and said, no, that's not what happened. The idiot walked in front of him and he unloaded. So that was a memorable experience just because you want to be the first. Well, I was the first. My most special memory is the one that you'd asked me about earlier, and that was in Gallagher during a basketball game. And I had a little boy that was about 6 years old, and he kept yelling, Pete, 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 Pete. And I told him to come down at halftime, and we didn't have all the activities at halftime that we have now. And so I'm down at the southeast corner of the gym, and he comes from the northwest corner, and I hear him screaming my name, and he's running to me, just full board. And I've told the story, the closer he gets, the faster he's running. And so I'm seeing him, and I get down on my knees, and I put my arms out, and the little boy hits me full speed and knocks me to the floor of Gallagher. And I, make a big scene out of it. And I'm thinking, okay, he's gonna hit me, knock me down, and then we're done. And instead, he just laid on me. And he just hugged me. And Gallagher went silent. Time stood still. And I thought, this is why I'm here. This is what it's about. For that one moment, that little boy knew nothing else other than his hero, his whatever that he wanted. That's all he knew. And that's my most special memory.
The kids are awesome, and you never know, I think, the impact that you make until you hear Rick's story or the guy that tried out for Pete and said, I met Pete when I was 3 years old, and here's a picture, and we're passing it down the aisle, and I'm like, I look at his resume, and I'm like, he was born in 1983. I was Pete when he was, and I know exactly where that was, because he said it was at this away football game, and I was like, hey, it's nice to meet you again 18 years later, we'll see what you got. And and he's Pete, Jared Wiley.
That's crazy. What was his reaction when you realized that it was you?
I don't think he was as impressed as I was. I thought it was cool. Because here's the thing too, when Rick, Billy, and I were Pete, there wasn't social media. No. So
Right.
we don't have that many pictures of us with kids or with, in different activities. So that's why I was saying that photo with the San Diego chicken, I was like, that's so cool. I thought it was me. It is.
I still think it's
it is. But thanks. But yeah, he enjoyed the fact that he got to meet me. I think he enjoyed the fact more that he got selected as Pete, but he was great. I mean, and so many times that's the thing, you have one guy that just blows the top off and stands out above all the rest, and you've got 4 or 5 others that are really good, and then like we said, you've got to figure out, okay, where's our consensus? But anyway, it's the kids that are so.
I mean, people will hand you a 4-day-old baby at age 22, and you're going, I'm going to drop this thing. Hurry up and take the picture so I can give it back. You know what I'm saying?
Also, you can't see.
Oh yeah, you can't.
Right,
and it's
yeah.
like, you're like, oh, don't move. And And you take,
And God forbid you lose your balance and the head goes back and you reach to grab the head.
But he lands on your chest and hugs you, and it's like the best moment of his life, all 3 days long.
That's right.
But we're always smiling every time somebody takes a picture. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing that, and when they, hey, okay. Oh, I don't have to smile because you can't see my face. But you're always smiling.
After a while, well, sometimes you not. But not very often. And most of the time you are.
You guys are talking about the pictures, and I've talked to Pistol Pete's before, and they estimated they're in thousands of pictures. Now, you three, as you mentioned, different era where there's not social media. But if you all had to estimate, how many pictures do you think you are in as Pistol Pete?
Oh, let me backtrack a bit. I think we're in thousands of pictures. We just don't have them.
Yeah.
Right.
We didn't see them on social media like today.
They had to send
Everybody's
them-
got a camera in their pocket, you know. How many? I don't know. It's because you think about, you know, how many people took pictures out here of Pete on the field. Maybe they weren't that close with a family member, a child, but you know, parades. I mean, there's a bunch of pictures taken.
Well, the athletic department didn't have OSU Max and all the production crews, so everything was coming through Ocala. And if you went to the Ocala, there were warehouse shelves of photographs, you know, of everything. So.